Welcome back, Coinology. In the quiet hum of everyday life, few people ever stop to notice the smallest details that pass through their fingers: the tiny copper coin, the humble penny, that clinks against keys and loose change at the bottom of a pocket. Yet, hidden in that modest disc of metal lies an entire chronicle of a nation's history, its progress, its mistakes, its rebirths. The 1999 United States 1-cent coin, a coin many might overlook, stands today as one of the most fascinating symbols of the modern minting era, a coin whose story reaches far beyond its 1-cent face value. And in certain rare forms, it has astonished collectors and historians alike with market values that stretch beyond comprehension. A coin once worth a single cent now whispered to hold a value of $10,500 million. A number so immense, it feels like myth, yet myths are often born from fragments of truth. To understand the 1999 1-cent coin, we must first return to the end of a century, the final year before the dawn of the new millennium. The world was changing rapidly. Technology was reshaping economies, the internet had begun its quiet invasion of human life, and the United States was reflecting on the century it had built. The year 1999 was a time of anticipation and nostalgia, a moment suspended between the old and the new. And within that year, the U.S. Mint continued its long tradition of producing one of the most enduring pieces of American identity, the Lincoln cent. Since 1909, the face of Abraham Lincoln had watched generations rise and fall, a permanent gaze of solemn dignity, etched into copper and zinc. In 1999, his portrait still remained, but the world around it had evolved beyond anything he could have imagined. The 1999 penny, like its predecessors, bore the noble image of the 16th President of the United States. Sculpted with precision and care, the coin carried not just Lincoln's likeness but the echoes of his ideals: unity, freedom, resilience. His face was designed by Victor David Brenner, whose initials, VDB, still mark the legacy of artistry in miniature. On the obverse, the word liberty stands firm beside Lincoln's profile, a word that has outlasted wars, crises, and cultural shifts. Above it, the phrase "In God We Trust" arches like a promise, a reflection of faith and perseverance that Americans had clung to for centuries. The year 1999 gleams beneath his chest, like a quiet signature of time itself. Every detail on that face is deliberate, measured, and rich with meaning. The weight of the 1999 penny was a product of its time, a blend of practicality and modern metallurgy. Gone were the days when pennies were pure copper. By the late 20th century, economic necessity had transformed the very substance of the cent. The 1999 coin was composed primarily of zinc, 97.5% zinc to be exact, coated with a thin layer of copper that gave it its familiar reddish-brown hue. Each coin weighed 2.5 grams, with a diameter of 19.05 millimeters and a smooth, unreeded edge. It was light, inexpensive, and durable, a mass-produced token of commerce that flowed through every hand in America. Yet, despite its commonplace purpose, something extraordinary happened to certain 1999 pennies, something that would transform them from ordinary currency into treasures worth millions, even billions, in collector value. As the century drew to a close, the U.S. Mint produced coins at three major facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Each had its own mint mark, small yet crucial letters that could alter the fate of a coin. The 1999 D penny, struck in Denver, became one of the most notorious and sought-after issues in coin collecting history, not because of its beauty or rarity at first glance, but because of the mysterious anomalies that appeared on some of its surfaces. For reasons still debated by numismatists today, certain 1999 D pennies displayed doubled features, misaligned strikes, or proof-like qualities that seemed impossible for regular mint circulation. These coins, accidentally born from the intricate machinery of minting, became legends among collectors. Some claim that the double die variations, where the design elements appear slightly duplicated due to a minting misalignment, gave the Lincoln portrait an almost ghostly presence, as if time itself had imprinted 2 centuries of Lincoln's memory onto a single coin. Others pointed to the near-perfect mirror finish of certain 1999's proof cents, which shimmered like art pieces rather than currency. Over time, rumors began to circulate: stories of a coin found in an attic, a coin discovered in an old jar of change, a coin that sold at auction for unthinkable sums. Whether true or embellished, these stories fueled the growing mystique of the 1999 penny. Collectors around the world began searching for them using magnifying glasses, microscopes, and digital scanners. Coin forums and collector clubs buzzed with excitement, each claiming new discoveries or hidden patterns that connected the 1999 series to earlier minting anomalies. Some theorized that certain 1999 pennies were struck using experimental dies in preparation for the new millennium, a testing ground for 2000's production run. Others believed that tiny inconsistencies in the alloy or temperature during striking gave birth to a microscopic variety of coins with unique tonal signatures. What was once just a penny had become a riddle, a metallic mystery that defied its face value. In the grander scope of American coinage, the 1999 penny stands at a crossroads between eras, between the classic copper designs of the past and the high-speed digital precision of the new century. The late 1990s were the last years before the US Mint embraced advanced laser engraving technology and computer-assisted die creation. Thus, every 1999 coin carries within it the trace of human craftsmanship, the subtle imperfections, the warmth of analog creation. That is part of its allure. Every nick, every gleam, every faint doubling is a fingerprint of history. Then came the legend, the rumor that somewhere, among the billions of 1999 pennies produced, a handful were struck with errors so significant, so unique, that their value transcended the bounds of collecting. These rare specimens, it was said, were priceless. One such story told of a coin found in circulation that bore a double die reverse so pronounced that even with the naked eye, the words United States of America appeared doubled, bold and shadowed. Another spoke of a proof coin bearing both a Philadelphia and Denver mint mark, something theoretically impossible. These anomalies became the foundation for an almost mythic valuation, whispered among collectors, repeated in auction halls, amplified online, a coin worth $10,500 million. A number that no economist could rationalize, no historian could confirm, but that symbolized the sheer emotional power of rarity, nostalgia, and obsession. For in truth, the worth of a coin has never been determined solely by its metal content or its denomination. It is determined by the story it carries, the human emotion it evokes, and the mystery it sustains. The 1999 penny, with its humble copper skin, had become an icon of that idea, proof that value is as much a matter of belief as of economics. When people say that a coin is priceless, what they mean is that its meaning exceeds measure. The 1999 1-cent coin is such an artifact, born ordinary, transformed by time, myth, and imagination into a treasure beyond comprehension. As we turn the coin over in our hands, feeling its lightness, tracing the edge where copper meets air, we can almost hear the hum of the mince machines in that final year of the 20th century. The clang of dies striking blanks, the whirl of conveyor belts, the rhythm of human precision that gave birth to billions of identical yet subtly unique coins. Each coin carried out into the world, passing from hand to hand, unnoticed, uncelebrated, until one day, decades later, a few of them would resurface, glowing beneath magnifiers, glinting under auction lights, rewriting the meaning of value itself. The 1999 penny was not just a coin. It was a witness to a century's end, to the legacy of Abraham Lincoln, to the evolution of American industry, and to the eternal human desire to find treasure in the ordinary. It is, in its smallest and simplest form, a time capsule of what humanity values most: memory, meaning, and the chance that even the most overlooked object can one day be worth more than all the gold in the world. As the years passed and the dawn of the new millennium washed over the world, most of the 1999 1-cent coins had already slipped quietly into circulation. They moved through grocery stores, gas stations, coffee shops, schools, and pockets. Millions of people handled them, spent them, dropped them, lost them, never realizing that some of those coins were unlike any others before or after. For the US Mint, it had been a routine year, a continuation of tradition. But for collectors, time would reveal that the final penny of the 20th century carried mysteries that would haunt the numismatic community for decades. The story of the 1999 penny's unexpected worth begins with a paradox. The US Mint struck over 12 billion pennies that year, making it one of the most abundant mintages in modern history. By all logic, a coin produced in such staggering numbers should be of little value beyond its face. And yet, rarity in the world of coins does not always lie in quantity, it hides in the invisible, the microscopic, the mistakes. The beauty of the 1999 penny is that within those billions, only a handful carry the anomalies that would change their destiny forever. To understand this transformation, we must step into the heart of the US Mint's production process, into a world of molten metal, precision dies, and mechanical choreography. It begins with blanking, the cutting of circular discs from massive copper-plated zinc sheets. These blanks, dull and unfinished, are washed, polished, and heated before being fed into the stamping presses. Here, under tons of hydraulic pressure, the design is struck onto each coin. For the 1999 penny, this process repeated thousands of times per minute. The pressure was immense, and the tolerance for error microscopic. Yet even the most advanced systems can falter under time, heat, and mechanical fatigue. A fraction of a millimeter's misalignment in the die, a single variation in metal temperature, or a slight shift in the die pressure could result in doubling, shadowing, or ghost images that escape unnoticed. The double die outburst, one of the most celebrated errors in all of coinage, occurs when the die itself is engraved twice at slightly different angles before production begins. Every coin struck by that die then carries that double impression, a hidden whisper of the mint's imperfection. For the 1999 series, a few such double die coins escaped into the wild. The Liberty appears faintly doubled, the date 1999 blurred like an echo. Collectors began noticing these details in early 2000, their discoveries spreading through collector clubs like wildfire. To some, it was a minor anomaly. To others, it was the birth of a legend. The market reacted in waves. Initially, these coins traded for modest premiums, $20, $50, $100. But as the years passed and their rarity became more apparent, prices soared. Auctions began featuring 1999 double-die pennies encased in protective holders, certified by professional grading services. The grades mattered: MS65, MS67, Proof 70 deep cameo. Each tiny increment of perfection multiplied the coin's value exponentially. Then came the first whispers of a sale that changed everything. A collector, whose name remains lost to history, was said to have found a 1999 D penny in near-perfect condition, bearing a double-die reverse of unparalleled clarity. The coin, according to legend, sold in a private transaction for an unimaginable sum, a figure that would later be retold as $10,500 million. Was it a myth? Was it exaggeration? Perhaps. But as with every great legend, the truth lies somewhere between fact and fascination. Numismatists have long debated whether this record sale ever truly occurred, but what matters more than the sale itself is the myth it created. The 1999 penny became a symbol, a metaphor for hidden value, for overlooked greatness, for the extraordinary concealed within the ordinary. Suddenly, everyone wanted to look again at the coins they had long ignored. People began digging through drawers, jars, and boxes of old change. Stories flooded the internet of people finding strange 1999 pennies, some bearing faint doubling, some appearing unusually lustrous. A wave of rediscovery swept across collectors young and old. The irony was poetic. In an era dominated by digital currencies and disappearing cash, the smallest denomination had regained a kind of sacred significance. The 1999 penny was no longer just a coin, it was a relic, a time traveler from a century that had just ended. Its weight of 2.5 grams, its coppery sheen, and its diameter of 19.05 millimeters suddenly became emblems of a physical world people were losing touch with. Every line of Lincoln's face, every curve of the Lincoln Memorial, felt like a reminder that history itself could be held in one's hand, and so, collectors began to assign deeper meanings to this coin. Some said the 1999 penny represented the closing of America's industrial century, a century defined by steel, copper, and invention. Others saw it as a bridge between two worlds, one analog, one digital. In a poetic sense, it was the last whisper of the 20th century's craftsmanship before machines and algorithms took over completely. Even more curious were the discoveries of off-metal strikes, rare instances where 1999 cents were accidentally struck on planchets meant for dimes or foreign coins. These mistakes, virtually impossible under normal conditions, created some of the rarest coinage ever documented. The sound of such a coin, lighter, higher pitched, slightly different from the normal clink of a penny, became a kind of secret code among collectors. They would listen for it, tap their coins against metal, hoping to hear the faint ring of fortune. But beyond the science and rarity, the story of the 1999 penny began to take on a spiritual undertone. It was not just about money anymore, it was about destiny. People found meaning in the idea that a simple cent, discarded or forgotten, could rise to unimaginable worth. The lesson was universal, that even the smallest things can contain infinite value. And that perhaps, value itself is not determined by markets or metals, but by the stories we choose to believe. In a sense, the 1999 penny became a mirror, reflecting back our collective fascination with rarity, our hunger for discovery, and our faith in hidden treasures. Its mythology expanded far beyond numismatics. Artists began referencing it in their works, poets in their verses, and filmmakers in subtle nods to lost relics of the modern age. It had crossed from currency into culture, yet, behind the curtain of legend, there are still those who chase the factual truth: coin historians, metallurgists, and archivists who study the 1999 mint records line by line. Some have theorized that the most valuable 1999 pennies may have originated from early test strikes using prototype dies meant for the following year's minting, coins that were never meant to leave the facility. Others claim that a limited number of error coins were quietly recalled, but not all were recovered. Whether through human oversight or fate's intervention, a few escaped, and those few became the stuff of numismatic mythology. Every coin tells a story, but the 1999 penny tells it twice, once through its physical design, and once through the legend it inspired. Its copper glint, under a beam of light, seems almost to flicker between centuries, a bridge of time compressed into 2.5 grams. When you hold it, you are holding the final breath of a century that built empires, invented flight, explored the moon, and wired the world together. You are holding history that hums softly, unseen but enduring, and so, as decades have passed, the fascination only deepens. Collectors still scour rolls of pennies, hoping to glimpse that rare doubling, that proof-like luster, that one small imperfection that turns base metal into myth. The story of the 1999 penny continues not because of a single auction or a legendary sale, but because it touches something primal in human nature, the desire to believe that greatness hides where no one thinks to look. The coin endures, silent, humble, ever present, as if reminding us that history's treasures are not always locked behind glass cases or buried under sand. Sometimes, they wait quietly in plain sight, resting in the palm of your hand, whispering of the past and daring you to look closer. As the 20th century faded into history and a new millennium dawned, humanity stood on the edge of transformation. The year 2000 brought both hope and uncertainty, and in that transition, a sense of nostalgia grew stronger than ever. Across the United States, millions of people began to look back, to remember, to collect, to preserve the tangible symbols of a century that had defined progress itself. Among these symbols, one object, small, simple, and unassuming, began to carry the weight of memory: the 1999 Lincoln penny. It was the last penny struck in the 20th century, the final cent of a 100-year journey that had mirrored America's evolution from an industrial nation to a digital empire. For many, it represented an end and a beginning. It was the coin of closure, the cent that bridged the old and the new. It was touched by the hands of those who had lived through wars, recessions, inventions, and revolutions, and then quietly passed into the hands of a new generation stepping into the unknown. But among the billions of 1999 pennies scattered into circulation, a handful held more than sentiment. They carried secrets, errors, and peculiarities that transformed them from mere currency into living relics of history. Collectors and historians began to trace the story of the Lincoln cent back to its origins in 1909, when it first replaced the Indian head cent that had circulated since the 19th century. The choice of Abraham Lincoln was deliberate. A century after his birth, the nation wanted to honor the man who had preserved the Union. The designer, Victor David Brenner, gave the coin not only Lincoln's profile but also a subtle human warmth rarely seen on currency. His initials, VDB, engraved beneath the shoulder, were controversial at first. Some thought them too prominent, an artist's vanity on a national emblem, yet they would become an inseparable part of the coin's legend. From that year forward, Lincoln's image never left the penny. Through world wars, the Great Depression, the space race, and the Cold War, his face endured, becoming an emblem of continuity. The coin evolved in composition, in reverse design, in color and texture, but its spirit never changed. It was always Lincoln, always liberty, always trust. And by the time the 1999 issue arrived, that design had been circulating for 9 full decades, nearly unchanged. It was, in many ways, the most familiar human image ever struck into metal in American life, yet by 1999, the penny's physical value had become almost symbolic. It cost more to mint than it was worth. Economists debated eliminating it altogether. To most, it was a relic of habit, an unnecessary artifact of small transactions. But to collectors, the penny represented more than economics. It was a piece of identity. The 1999 issue was particularly special because it marked the end of an era, the final year before the 2000s, the last coin struck entirely under the 20th century's methods. Even its metallic composition, 97.5% zinc, 2.5% copper, was an echo of the transformations that had taken place over the decades. Once pure copper, the cent had evolved into a shell of copper over a heart of zinc, as if symbolizing America itself, bright on the surface, practical at its core, but still bearing the luster of history. Within the controlled chaos of the U.S. Mint, billions of 1999 pennies poured from presses in Philadelphia and Denver. Machines hissed, dice struck, conveyors rattled, and in that mechanical rhythm, history was minted. Most of these coins were flawless, uniform, indistinguishable from one another. But occasionally, imperfection found its way into perfection's domain. A misaligned die, a doubled strike, a fragment of dust caught between press and planchet, any of these could create something new, something rare, something unintended. In numismatics, such accidents are miracles. The 1999 penny, with its doubled dies and off-metal strikes, became a canvas for these miracles. Some bore faint duplications of Lincoln's features, giving his profile an ethereal depth, as though the president himself had shifties were not errors in the ordinary sense, they were signatures of chance, frozen forever in metal. The market for these coins grew, first slowly, then exponentially. By the early 2000s, collectors began paying thousands for specimens in pristine condition, authenticated by experts and sealed in graded holders. Professional Coin Grading Service, PCGS, and Numismatic Guarantee Company, NGC, became the arbiters of truth, examining every line and curve under microscopes to verify authenticity. For them, the 1999 cent was more than currency, it was a moment in history, encapsulated and preserved. Then came the era of myth. Somewhere in the mid-2010s, stories began to circulate online about a mysterious auction. According to rumor, an ultra-rare 1999 D Lincoln cent, a double die obverse of perfect strike, had been sold privately for an astronomical sum, $10,500 million. The number defied logic. No coin in human history had ever approached such a value. Yet the story spread like wildfire. It appeared in collector circles, discussion boards, whispers at conventions. Some said it was a publicity stunt, others believed it was symbolic, a statement about the immeasurable worth of historical artifacts. But there were those who swore it had happened, that somewhere, in a private vault, that coin still lay under glass, untouched, priceless. Whether the figure was literal or metaphorical, it captured the imagination of millions. The 1999 penny became more than a coin, it became a myth of modern times, a story of transformation, of discovery, of how the smallest thing could hold infinite meaning. Its supposed billion-dollar worth was less about market speculation and more about belief. The story of that coin represented the human desire to find value in forgotten things, to believe that even the smallest artifact could carry the weight of history. Collectors began to reinterpret the design itself. They spoke of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, the monument within the coin, as a symbol of remembrance. Inside that memorial, the tiny seated figure of Lincoln could be seen through magnification, almost invisible to the naked eye. It was as if the coin contained a coin within itself, a reflection of remembrance within remembrance. The phrase e pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one, gained new significance. It became an allegory for the countless identical pennies, among which only one might hold the mark of destiny. The cultural ripples of this phenomenon reached far beyond the world of collectors. Schools began teaching students about the Lincoln cent as part of American heritage. Museums created exhibits showcasing its evolution through the decades. Economists used it as a metaphor for the changing value of money. Even philosophers and writers began invoking the 1999 penny in essays about meaning and perception, how something as small as a cent could carry stories larger than nations. As the decades passed, the 1999 penny became a relic not only of the past but of continuity itself. It circulated through changing economies, survived recessions, pandemics, and technological revolutions. Even as cash faded from daily use, the penny endured, stubborn, humble, unchanged. Its survival became its power. People began to keep them, not to spend them. They collected jars, boxes, and rolls of 1999 cents, hoping one might be the chosen one. The mythical billion-dollar penny, the symbol of hidden fortune. In quiet corners of the world, treasure hunters examine coins under magnifying lamps, whispering as if deciphering ancient maps. A slight doubling in the 9, a faint line under Liberty, a shimmer in the copper tone, every detail became a clue. The 1999 penny turned ordinary people into detectives, historians, and dreamers. It blurred the line between numismatics and mythology, between history and legend, and so, it endures, a coin that transcended its purpose. It was minted to represent value, but it came to represent something far greater, the hope that in the smallest, most overlooked things lies a universe of meaning. Its surface may tarnish, its edges may wear, but its story grows brighter with every telling. The 1999 penny reminds us that value is never fixed, it is shaped by time, belief, and the hands that hold it. As the documentary of time continues, one thing remains certain: the story of the 1999 1-cent coin is not finished. It is still out there, in drawers, in forgotten jars, in the quiet corners of lives it once passed through. Somewhere, perhaps, a single coin glows faintly under the dim light of destiny, waiting for the moment when its true story will be revealed to the world. As time moved forward, the world changed around the penny. The sound of digital transactions replaced the clinking of coins, and the glow of screens replaced the gleam of copper. Yet, the 1999 Lincoln cent continued to linger in drawers, pockets, and jars across America. It had become something more than currency, it had become a relic of memory, a tangible link to the century that had just ended. Collectors around the globe began to feel a quiet pull toward this coin. It was not just about the physical piece of metal, nor about the mythical $10,500 million valuation whispered in the hidden corners of the numismatic world. It was about the idea that within ordinary things lay the extraordinary. Every coin hunter, every historian, every dreamer who searched through handfuls of change shared the same feeling that maybe, just maybe, destiny could be found in the smallest of circles. The search for the 1999 penny took on a life of its own. In quiet living rooms and busy workshops, magnifying glasses and digital microscopes became instruments of obsession. A coin's faint doubling on a single letter could set off a storm of excitement. People compared photographs, analyzed surface luster, and debated on forums deep into the night. Some searched through tens of thousands of coins, eyes weary but hearts alight with the thrill of discovery. Others wandered through flea markets, antique stores, and estate sales, hunting for that single glimmer that could change everything. In the great halls of auction houses, the atmosphere was different, electric yet reverent. Under glass cases and bright lights, rare 1999 pennies gleamed with quiet power. Auctioneers spoke in tones that balanced precision with awe. Each coin's grade, each trace of doubling, each tiny imperfection could mean a difference of millions. When the bidding began, hands rose slowly, as if in ritual. The numbers climbed hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, and then beyond, the rhythm of human desire measured in currency, but fueled by faith. The room would fall silent when the hammer struck, the echo resonating like a heartbeat from history itself. For those who could not attend, screens became their windows. Online, the legend grew even larger. Social media posts, collector forums, and digital archives turned the 1999 penny into a phenomenon. Videos showed magnified details of Lincoln's profile, tutorials taught how to identify doubling, and stories emerged of life-changing finds. Whether the stories were real or romanticized mattered little, they fed the collective imagination of millions who longed for a connection to the past. But what was it about this particular coin that captured so many souls? Perhaps it was the timing, the final penny of the 20th century, carrying the face of a man whose memory defined the American spirit. Perhaps it was the symbolism, the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, a miniature temple of democracy, standing eternal on the smallest piece of metal. Or perhaps it was the mystery, the unanswered questions about minting errors, the whispers of secret test strikes, the rumor of a single coin worth more than empires. Whatever the reason, the 1999 penny became something larger than itself. It became a mirror reflecting human longing, the desire to discover, to possess, to hold a piece of time in one's hand. People began to talk about destiny and coincidence. Someone might find an ordinary 1999 penny and feel a strange weight in it, as if history had chosen them to keep it. Others told stories of finding one on the ground just when they needed a sign, a small circle of metal that seemed to whisper, "Look closer." Even scientists began to take interest. Metallurgists studied the alloy compositions, searching for patterns that might distinguish the rare errors from the common coins. Historians pored over mint records, tracing production schedules and die changes. Some claimed that the rarest varieties were struck during night shifts at the Denver Mint, when quality control was less rigorous. Others argued that a few proof-like strikes were experimental runs meant to test polishing techniques for the Millennium coinage. None of it could be proven, yet every theory added a new layer of fascination. The story of the 1999 penny reached beyond borders. Collectors in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East began to trade and study them. The coin became an international curiosity, a symbol of American history, an artifact of the modern age. Its image appeared in documentaries, magazines, and exhibitions. Even those who cared little for coins could not help but feel wonder at the idea that a simple cent could command such reverence. The legend of its unimaginable worth, $10,500 million, had become a mythic number, repeated not for its literal truth but for its symbolic meaning. It was the price of rarity, the price of imagination, the value of believing that something so small could carry the weight of centuries. Economists dismissed the number, but poets embraced it. They said the 1999 penny was not worth billions in money, but billions in meaning, and perhaps that was the true value all along. For what is money if not a measure of belief? Every coin, every bill, every transaction depends on trust, the same invisible force that binds value to metal. The 1999 penny, in its quiet way, reminded people of that truth. It reminded them that worth is created, not assigned, that stories give power to symbols, that time transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. In living rooms and libraries, collectors began to speak of their coins not as investments but as companions of history. They would hold a 1999 penny under a lamp and study it as if gazing into the past, the soft gleam of copper, the fine lines of Lincoln's face, the echo of the mint's machinery frozen in its texture. For some, it was a meditation. For others, it was a calling. As years passed, technology changed the way the search continued. Artificial intelligence programs could scan thousands of images to identify potential errors. Digital databases cataloged every known 1999 variation. Online communities formed across continents, groups bound not by geography but by shared fascination. The penny had become a global mystery, uniting people through curiosity and wonder, and somewhere within that vast network of seekers, the question persisted: does the mythical billion-dollar penny truly exist? Is it hidden in a vault, protected by secrecy and pride? Or is it still out there, unrecognized, resting in a forgotten jar of coins? No one can say. But the mystery itself has become part of its legacy. The legend keeps the search alive. The 1999 penny endures as a quiet symbol of faith, not religious faith, but the faith of belief itself, the belief that small things matter, that history is alive in the ordinary, that beauty can exist in imperfection. Every time a hand drops a penny into a fountain, makes a wish, or saves one for luck, it echoes the same human instinct that drives the search for the rare 1999 cent, the desire to connect, to remember, to find meaning in something real. And so, the coin waits. Somewhere, a faint glint of copper lies under dust, unseen, unrecognized. It could be in a collector's vault, or in the pocket of a traveler, or in the earth itself, buried beneath decades of time. It waits for discovery, for the next chapter of its story to be told. For the story of the 1999 penny is not only about history or money or rarity, it is about us. It is about how we see the world, how we assign value, how we search for wonder in the smallest of things. And as long as someone, somewhere, turns over a coin and looks just a little closer, its story will never end. As the 21st century unfolded, the world around the coin transformed faster than any age before it. Paper faded into plastic, metal into data, and copper into code. The language of value began to shift from jingling pockets to glowing screens, yet somewhere in that transition, the small, humble penny held its ground like a heartbeat that refused to stop. The 1999 Lincoln cent, born at the edge of 2 centuries, seemed to bridge both worlds, a whisper from the tactile past echoing into the digital future. Collectors who had once gathered in community halls now met across luminous grids of pixels. Online auctions, live-streamed valuations, and social media discussions replaced the old dusty catalogs. A photograph of a single penny could now travel around the planet in seconds, magnified, debated, idolized. And there, amidst millions of images, the 1999 cent reappeared again and again, the last of its century, the one said to hold an impossible fortune, the coin that had somehow become more legend than metal. People no longer searched only with their hands, they searched with algorithms. Programs scanned photographs for die cracks, doubling, and minute shifts invisible to human sight. Artificial intelligence learned to recognize subtle distortions in Lincoln's jawline or in the lettering of Liberty. Thousands of coins once dismissed as ordinary were pulled from obscurity by digital eyes that never tired. Every discovery reignited the same thrill, the idea that history could still surprise us, that even in an age of automation, mystery remained. Numismatic historians began to write anew about the meaning of the penny. They argued that the 1999 cent was a symbolic farewell to a century defined by industry, revolution, and the individual struggle for equality. Lincoln's portrait, steadfast and solemn, became a metaphor for endurance, a face that had weathered both the Civil War and the endless churn of modern commerce. The memorial on the reverse, that miniature temple carved into copper, was no longer merely architecture, it had become a shrine to continuity. In classrooms and museums, curators used the coin to teach not just economics but philosophy. They spoke of intrinsic and assigned value, of how societies project meaning onto metal. Children listened as teachers passed around the small disc, telling them that in 1999 a cent could still buy a moment's thought, a reminder that everything precious begins as something small. And somewhere in each audience, a child would look closer, wondering if their coin might be the coin, the one worth billions not because of its price but because of its story. Meanwhile, in distant vaults, investors and collectors debated the truth of the $10,500 million legend. Some swore a specimen existed, a flawless strike with microscopic anomalies linking it to a secret experimental die, perhaps preserved by a mint employee who never knew its destiny. Others dismissed it as myth, a collective dream born from internet whispers. Yet both sides were bound by the same fascination, the idea that perfection, or a hint of error, could rewrite the concept of worth itself. Auctions grew ever more theatrical. The auctioneer's voice carried through digital streams, echoing across continents. Each lot became a story, each bid a heartbeat. When a particularly pristine 1999 cent surfaced, chat feeds exploded with speculation. Was it the one? Was this copper disc the legendary specimen? Numbers raced upward, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, and somewhere behind every bid was a pulse of hope. When the gavel finally fell, applause filled both the room and the chat windows, a hybrid symphony of the physical and the virtual, but the legend extended beyond commerce. Artists began to use the penny in installations, walls built of 1-cent coins arranged into portraits of Lincoln dissolving into abstract copper light. Writers filled pages with metaphors of smallness and persistence. Musicians sampled the sound of coins dropping, looping it into rhythmic heartbeats that pulsed through songs about memory and value. The 1999 cent had escaped its minting, it had entered culture itself. Somewhere in a small town, an elderly man sat at his kitchen table with a jar of coins collected over decades. He poured them out beneath a single bulb, the light glinting across worn surfaces. His fingers, calloused from work, moved one coin at a time. Then, among the dull browns, one coin gleamed brighter, a 1999 Lincoln cent, edges still sharp. He turned it over, saw the memorial shining like a tiny sunrise, and smiled. It was worth a cent, perhaps more, perhaps nothing. But to him it carried a lifetime of labor, of change received after coffee and bread, of the ticking rhythm of ordinary life. Value, he thought, was never only about numbers. In laboratories, metallurgists measured trace elements, discovering that environmental conditions had altered the coin's hue differently depending on storage. Some specimens carried a faint rose tint, others deep orange. A few coins had darkened nearly to bronze, as if time itself had painted them. Each variation told a microscopic story of air, humidity, and handling, an invisible diary etched into copper. The researchers published their findings, and collectors began to chase not only errors but shades of time, calling certain tones sunset copper, autumn bronze, or ghost red. Documentaries appeared on streaming platforms, their narrators speaking in hushed reverence about the last cent of the millennium. Cinematic slow-motion shots showed coins spinning, catching light like planets turning through a copper universe. Interviews cut between historians, economists, and ordinary citizens who had found one in a parking lot or inherited one from a grandparent. The common thread among them all was wonder, the sense that in an era of intangible money, something physical still carried soul, and so the penny lived on, surviving trends, recessions, digital currencies, and even the government's periodic debates about eliminating it. Each time officials proposed its retirement, public voices rose in defense. People argued that to remove the penny was to remove a piece of identity, a symbol of humility and persistence. They said that as long as Lincoln's face watched from the smallest coin, the memory of equality, sacrifice, and perseverance would never fade. By now, the 1999 cent had become a kind of time capsule. In its metal were traces of a century closing and a millennium opening, a world moving from paper to pixel, from analog hope to digital ambition. It stood as a quiet witness to that shift, a reminder that history is always smaller and more personal than it seems in textbooks, and still, somewhere, that rumored masterpiece, the flawless, mythical specimen, remains the ultimate dream. Maybe it rests unnoticed in an attic jar, or perhaps it lies deep within a collection so vast even its owner doesn't know it's there. Maybe, like all legends, it exists to keep us searching. For what would the world be without mysteries to chase? The penny's voice, if it could speak, would whisper, "I am only copper, yet I have seen centuries. I am worth 1 cent, yet I have carried empires of meaning. Hold me, and you hold time itself." As the years continued their slow, endless march, the world began to forget how heavy coins once felt in the palm. Pockets no longer jingled. Payment became invisible digits, swipes, and glows. Yet in that quiet shift, the 1999 penny became something rare, a survivor. Not just a survivor of time, but of relevance. It no longer circulated through stores or hands, it lived in memories, in drawers, in the faint metallic scent that lingered when one opened an old box of change. Historians began to speak of the penny as a witness, the last generation of coins that saw the human hand more than any machine. The 1999 cent, they said, was the final breath of an era when money was still tangible, when people could touch their worth. Scholars described it as a relic of tactile trust, a small piece of copper that bridged feeling and finance. And within that narrative, its mythic value, $10,500 million, became less an appraisal and more a metaphor. It was the measure of meaning itself, not of market collectors, now older and grayer, passed on their stories to the young. They told of nights spent under lamps, searching through rolls of coins for the elusive variation that might change everything. They spoke of magnifiers, microscopes, patience, and belief. They told of auctions that felt like pilgrimages, of bids that rose like prayers. For them, the 1999 cent was not only metal but memory, a spark that connected generations through wonder.in digital museums. High-resolution scans of the coin rotated endlessly under virtual light. Every groove, every ridge, every faint imperfection was immortalized in pixels. Millions could explore it with a fingertip on glass, enlarging Lincoln's weary eyes until they filled the screen. Teachers used these scans to explain how engraving, art, and metallurgy intersected, how the smallest design could hold a nation's ideals. The Lincoln Memorial on the reverse stood like a miniature stage, each column precise, each shadow deliberate. In that design, history breathed. Somewhere in the vast networks of the internet, new legends began to rise. Whispers circulated of a 1999 penny found embedded in the concrete foundation of a demolished building, gleaming untouched by time. Another tale told of a coin discovered in a time capsule opened on the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, a symbolic circle of fate. None of these stories could be proven, but each added a brushstroke to the ever-growing myth. The coin was no longer only an artifact, it had become a storyteller itself. The economists once argued that the penny's time was over, that production costs outweighed its usefulness. But they underestimated the human heart. The moment talk of abolishing the cent surfaced again, movements rose to defend it. Letters flooded the treasury. People wrote that the penny was not about economics but identity. It was about childhood memories, first allowances, the clinking sound in jars, the sparkle of luck when finding one heads up on the ground. They said that erasing the penny would be like erasing a heartbeat from America's story. Artists kept the legend alive. One sculptor created a monument made entirely of 1999 pennies, a tower that caught the sunlight and threw it back as red fire. Another artist designed digital installations where each viewer's reflection merged with Lincoln's, symbolizing that every person carried a trace of history within themselves. In galleries, the coin was no longer currency, it was poetry. Meanwhile, technology advanced further. Artificial intelligence could now simulate minting conditions from decades ago, recreating digital twins of coins with near-perfect accuracy. Historians used these tools to trace how minute die shifts occurred in 1999, how certain presses produced microscopic quirks that became the signature of a rare variety. The boundary between science and myth blurred, and with every discovery, the story deepened. Then came the day when a private collector announced the discovery of what might be the perfect 1999 penny. It was encapsulated, graded, authenticated by machines and humans alike. Its surfaces gleamed like liquid fire, untouched, flawless. The world watched as images spread across news outlets. Was this the legendary coin that stories had promised? Some said yes, some doubted. But when it appeared at auction, something profound happened. People did not see a coin. They saw history condensed into a circle. They saw effort, faith, time, and chance, the intersection of all human longing. The bidding began, and for hours the numbers rose. When the final bid came, an astronomical figure, the crowd fell silent. It wasn't the money that mattered, it was the feeling that a myth had become momentarily real. In that silence, the penny transcended itself. It was no longer an object of trade but a symbol of continuity. It connected generations, from those who had first held it fresh from the mint to those who now viewed it through augmented reality lenses. It reminded everyone that progress need not erase memory. Even as society moved toward digital coins and blockchain tokens, the small piece of copper continued to whisper, "Value begins with belief." Philosophers began to reference the 1999 penny in essays about perception and permanence. They wrote that humanity assigns worth not to things, but to stories, that the 1999 cent was proof of how collective imagination can transform matter into myth. It was the same impulse that turned ordinary stones into relics, paintings into treasures, and music into immortality. In homes across the world, people still kept jars of pennies, not for spending, but for keeping. Children would ask their parents about the old copper coins, and parents would tell them the story of the 1999 penny, of its mysterious value, of how it bridged centuries. The story spread quietly, across languages and cultures, until it became folklore. Somewhere, a child might close their hand around a coin and feel the weight of all who had held it before: the workers, the dreamers, the seekers. Time went on, and the coin's image appeared in films, novels, even holographic exhibitions. It became an emblem of persistence, the smallest unit of value carrying the greatest weight of history. Economists began to call it the cent of faith, artists called it the circle of time, and the public simply called it the lucky penny. And still, through all of this, one truth endured: the 1999 cent, like all symbols, lived not in vaults or auctions but in the collective imagination of humanity. Every time someone looked closely at a coin, hoping for something rare, they participated in the same ancient ritual, the search for meaning in the material world. The penny's true fortune was never in dollars, it was in the countless hearts it touched, the dreams it inspired, and the wonder it refused to let die. As the light of a new century shone brighter, the penny rested quietly in its place. It needed no validation, no proof of its mythical worth. It had become what all great relics become: timeless. Somewhere, perhaps in a dusty drawer or an old box beneath a bed, a single 1999 penny still waits. Its copper glows faintly, whispering the story of a nation, of value, of belief, of everything small that once changed the world. The story of the 1999 penny had begun as metal, but by now it had become philosophy. It no longer belonged only to collectors or historians, it belonged to everyone who had ever wondered what makes something valuable, who had ever held a small object and felt it hum with unseen meaning. The coin had become a mirror for the human spirit, quiet, enduring, reflective. When people looked at the 1999 cent, they saw more than copper. They saw time compressed into a circle, a record of millions of exchanges, millions of hands, millions of silent choices. Every scratch and imperfection carried its own biography. A faint nick might recall the day a cashier passed it to a child buying candy in 1999, the year before the world crossed into a new millennium. A darkened patch of tarnish might mark years in a drawer beside forgotten receipts. The coin held all of it without judgment, as if to say that even where was proof of having lived. Philosophers began to speak of the penny as a parable. They said it showed that worth is not an inherent property but a covenant between minds, a shared belief that turns metal into meaning. And if a small coin could be believed to hold $10,500 million of value, what did that say about belief itself? Perhaps, they mused, humanity's greatest treasure was not gold or copper, but imagination. Artists, poets, and filmmakers took up the theme. In galleries, visitors walked through rooms lined with amplified images of the penny's surface, each ridge projected stories of birth, decay, and rebirth. Poets read verses comparing its circular form to the orbit of time, where beginnings and endings touch. Musicians sampled the faint ring of coins clinking, building symphonies that swelled into digital choirs chanting the date 1999 like a mantra. The more people looked, the more the coin became an idea rather than an object. It represented endurance in a world obsessed with speed. It reminded them that value can hide in the overlooked, that greatness may be pressed into the smallest shapes. And in an age of fleeting attention, the penny asked for stillness, to stop, to hold, to see, as some spiritual teachers began to carry the 1999 cent as a token of humility. They spoke of how its face bore the image of Lincoln, a man who had guided a nation through division. They said the coin whispered lessons of patience, equality, and quiet strength. In meditation halls, a few practitioners placed a penny at the center of the floor, watching how its copper caught the light like a miniature sun. To them it symbolized unity, countless atoms bound into one form, countless people bound by one story. As decades passed, the mythic worth of $10,500 million came to symbolize something different, not greed, but aspiration. It represented every dream that begins small and grows through belief. Students who heard the story used it as a metaphor for persistence, telling themselves that even a penny can contain worlds if you look close enough. In that sense, the 1999 cent became a quiet anthem for resilience. In homes around the globe, parents told their children that when they found a penny on the ground, especially one from 1999, they should pick it up and remember two things: gratitude for what is given, and wonder for what remains undiscovered. And so, long after physical coins faded from circulation, the ritual endured. Somewhere, in the dust of city streets or the grass of rural fields, a child would spot a small flash of copper, bend down, and feel that ancient connection to time. Archivists in the future began to treat the penny as an artifact of faith. They preserved it in climate-controlled glass, not for its metal content but for its message. On its label, beside the mint mark and date, they wrote a single sentence: proof that belief can turn the smallest thing into a legend. Visitors stood before it in silence, seeing their reflections merge with Lincoln's calm gaze, and the penny seemed to breathe with them. It was no longer an object of commerce or even of collection. It was a circle of memory, an emblem of humility. It had outlived trends, currencies, even economies, yet it remained unbroken, the same diameter, the same face, the same quiet dignity. In its simplicity lay its strength. As the documentary camera would linger on its surface, the narrator's voice would lower to a whisper. You could almost hear the hum of history vibrating through the copper. The light would glint off the word liberty, and for a moment, the viewer would feel it, that tiny, miraculous pulse of connection between centuries. The 1999 penny, once minted by machines, now lived through meaning alone. It told a single, enduring truth, that everything we value begins as something ordinary, and that time, faith, and imagination are what make it extraordinary. And somewhere, even now, a penny rests in the palm of someone who does not yet know its story. But when they turn it, when the date catches the light and the year 1999 shines again, they will pause, just for a heartbeat, and feel the weight of 1,000 dreams pressed into copper. The legend of the 1999 penny had by now grown far beyond the mint that gave it birth. It lived in museums and in myths, in classroom lessons and whispered conversations, in the way a person's eyes softened when they found one glinting on a sidewalk. The coin had ceased to be an artifact. It had become a bridge, a delicate link between what had been and what might still be. In quiet libraries, historians wrote that this single cent had outlived empires of technology. They traced how it moved through the hands of workers, soldiers, dreamers, and children, carrying with it the invisible fingerprints of an entire people. They described how, as money vanished into screens and codes, the penny endured as the last reminder that value was once something you could feel: cool metal, small enough to lose, heavy enough to matter. Collectors now spoke of it not in terms of price but of presence. To hold a 1999 penny was to hold the echo of a century ending, a century of war and peace, discovery and despair, invention and imagination. Its copper surface bore the warmth of human touch, and in that warmth, people felt a kind of reverence. Even those who had no interest in coins found themselves staring at it longer than they expected, sensing a story too deep for words. Somewhere, a filmmaker recorded the sound of a single penny dropping onto a wooden table. The tone rang pure, sharp, and fading. He looped that sound into a soundtrack for his film about memory, a film where generations pass, cities crumble, but the same coin remains, found again and again by different hands. The sound of copper striking wood became the heartbeat of the story, the reminder that even the smallest thing can echo across time. Meanwhile, in a classroom overlooking a modern skyline, a teacher told her students about how money once carried faces, presidents, symbols, ideals. She held up a 1999 penny between her fingers and said, "This is more than metal. This is a century, compressed." The children leaned forward, the copper catching the light across their curious faces. For a moment, they were connected to a time before their birth, to the hands that minted, held, and believed in that coin. At night, in homes across the world, small rituals persisted. People still dropped pennies into fountains, still made wishes, still believed that luck could live inside a circle of copper. Some said that if you found a 1999 penny, it meant your past was speaking to you, urging you not to forget what was real. Others said it was a reminder that beauty still exists in simple things. Whatever the belief, it always ended the same way, with someone holding that coin, smiling, and keeping its eye. In the great museums of the future, the 1999 cent would rest beneath glass, its surface lit softly from above. The placard might list its weight 2.5 grams, its composition 97.5% zinc, 2.5% copper, and its designer's name. But visitors would linger not for the facts, but for the feeling. They would see their reflection merge with Lincoln's face, and in that merging, something wordless would pass between generations. Of the camera of our documentary might pan slowly over rows of these coins, each one slightly different in hue, some bright, some dimmed by time. The narrator's voice would say quietly that no two pennies are ever the same, just as no two lives are. Each carries its own pattern of light and shadow, its own journey through countless hands. And in that diversity lies unity. The shared human story pressed into metal. Economists, poets, and scientists would continue to debate the meaning of its supposed worth, $10,500 million, but the truth would lie elsewhere. Its true value was not in what it could buy, but in what it could make people remember. It was proof that the imagination of a species could transform the ordinary into the sacred. As the film reached its quiet middle, we might hear the hum of a mint machine fading into silence, replaced by the sound of wind moving through trees. The narrator would whisper that the penny, like all things, would one day return to the earth, that copper would corrode, zinc would fade, and yet its story would endure, carried in memory, in language, in love. Because stories, unlike metal, do not rust. In a final montage, we might see the penny traveling again across continents, across time. A child drops one into a wishing well. A worker presses one into the hand of another as a token of luck. A traveler finds one in a foreign country and keeps it as a reminder of home. Each act, small and quiet, continues the same lineage of faith, and through all of this, the 1999 penny remains unchanged. The face of Lincoln, solemn and watchful, continues to gaze toward the word liberty, as if to remind every generation that freedom and value are never separate, that even the smallest token can hold the greatest ideals. The memorial on the reverse, still standing in perfect proportion, remains a symbol of endurance, of stone and copper, time and memory. When the credits of this story roll, the camera might return to that same coin, lying in the light. Dust drifts through the air. The narrator's final words drift like a breath. It began as a cent. It became a century. And though time will move on, the story of belief, pressed once into copper in the year 1999, will never fade. By the time the world had fully crossed into its digital age, when most people no longer touched money at all, the 1999 penny had become something like a heartbeat from another lifetime. It lingered quietly in drawers, sealed in collections, preserved behind glass. Yet somehow it still lived, not as a tool of exchange, but as a vessel of memory. The hum of its legend continued to travel, soft but unbroken, through conversations, through art, through the faint clinking of coins that remained in circulation. The 1999 cent had outlasted more than 2 decades of technological change. Machines that once printed and pressed it had been dismantled, their metal melted into new inventions, but the coin remained intact. It carried with it the ghost of the 20th century, that turbulent, beautiful, contradictory century that had given birth to the modern world. When people looked at the penny, they saw not only Lincoln and the memorial, but the entire panorama of human striving, wars, inventions, heartbreaks, triumphs. In small museums, guides would tell visitors that this coin represented the threshold between centuries, the last cent struck before a new millennium reshaped the human story. Children listened, eyes wide, to tales of how such a coin could be worth not just millions, but meaning itself. And when they were handed replicas to hold, they ran their fingers along the ridges, feeling time beneath their fingertips. Collectors who had grown old spoke of the penny as one might speak of an old friend. They said it had taught them patience, detail, reverence. One collector, near the end of his life, wrote in a journal that searching for the 1999 penny had shown him the beauty of imperfection, that every coin, like every person, carried marks of where it had been. He wrote that the legendary $10,500 million value was never about price, it was a metaphor for how deeply people can care about something small somewhere. A filmmaker might show this man holding a coin between 2 trembling fingers, turning it slowly under lamplight. The copper gleams red and gold. His eyes fill with the reflection of it, and he smiles. Outside, the city hums, unaware. The camera lingers. The narrator's voice murmurs that memory lives in the smallest things, that sometimes history hides in the dust of the ordinary. Scholars began to describe the penny as a human fossil, not of bone or stone, but of intention. It was the evidence that people once believed in tangible value, in holding what they earned, in feeling the weight of their work. The coin was proof that touch mattered, that connection mattered, that even the smallest artifact could bear the fingerprint of civilization, and yet, its legend still whispered of mystery. Somewhere out there, perhaps, the flawless specimen still lay undiscovered, the mythical piece that no one had yet found, the one perfect cent that would complete the circle. Maybe it was already in a collection, misidentified, or hidden in a jar of ordinary change. Maybe its destiny was to remain lost, so that the search itself would never end. For in the end, that was the real story, not discovery, but the endless hope of it. People kept searching, not for wealth, but for wonder. They looked through handfuls of coins, scanning dates and mint marks, feeling that same old thrill. When they found a 1999 penny, they paused. Sometimes they would keep it, slip it into a pocket, and say nothing. That tiny act was enough, a private acknowledgement that even in a vast, data-driven world, there were still miracles small enough to hold. The camera might drift now through scenes of ordinary life, a child dropping a coin into a fountain, an artist embedding one into a sculpture, a scientist studying one under a microscope, a street musician pressing one into a stranger's hand before walking away. Each act, though different, would echo the same silent statement that value is what we give, not what we take. When the music swells, the narrator might say that the 1999 penny story is really the story of belief itself, belief that meaning can survive the passage of time, belief that something created by machines can still carry a soul, belief that we are connected across generations by touch and trust, and in that belief, the penny achieves what no currency ever could: it becomes immortal. Not because it is worth $10,500 million, but because it has taught countless people to look closer, to wonder, to remember. In the quiet final minutes, the film would show the penny resting on an open palm. Sunlight filters through a window, turning the copper into liquid fire. The voice of the narrator fades almost to a whisper. He speaks of how every era leaves behind small symbols that outlive it, how, when all else changes, a few objects remain to remind us that we were here, that we believed, that we created, and then, as the image of the coin fills the screen, we might hear only the faint sound of wind, the soft hum of memory, and one last line: perhaps it was never about the money. Perhaps it was always about what we choose to treasure. The light fades now. The story, like the century it honors, drifts toward its quiet horizon. We return to the image that began it all, a single coin resting against the grain of a wooden table, its copper still catching the last faint trace of daylight. Time has passed through it, yet it remains. The air hums softly with the echo of everything it has seen, the hands that pressed it, the pockets that carried it, the hearts that believed in it. In this stillness, the penny is no longer just a coin. It has become a language, one spoken in silence, understood without words. Its surface tells of history, of patience, of the human instinct to preserve meaning in matter. The weight of 2.5 grams holds an entire century's heartbeat, a map of ideals forged in metal. The camera would move closer now, almost reverently, until every ridge, every micro-scratch, every gleam of copper becomes a landscape. The voice of the narrator grows softer, deeper, slower. He speaks not of currency, but of continuity, that strange, beautiful thread that connects a person in 1999 to one in the far future, both pausing to marvel at the same small thing. The penny does not know its own legend. It does not know that it has been valued at $10,500 million. It does not know of the collectors who dream of it, the historians who write about it, the storytellers who shape it into myth. It simply exists, quietly fulfilling its purpose: to remind, to endure, to reflect. Perhaps that is the truest measure of worth, not in the noise of fame or the glitter of gold, but in the quiet persistence of memory. The 1999 penny has achieved what every civilization hopes to achieve: to be remembered, to be seen, to be held once more after the passing of ages. As the scene widens, we see the world it has outlived, cities aglow with digital light, skies filled with satellites, voices carried through invisible air. Yet somewhere, someone still turns a coin between their fingers, still feels the weight of time in their palm. It is an act both ancient and eternal. It is the same act that began thousands of years ago, when humans first pressed their hopes into metal and called it value. The film now begins its long final montage. Images fade one into another: a worker in 1999 watching pennies fall from the mince presses like rain, a child decades later discovering one in a forgotten drawer, an old woman in a quiet home running her thumb across its edge, smiling faintly. The same coin, the same light, the same story, repeating through generations. The narrator's voice lingers over these images, filled with wonder rather than certainty. He speaks of how the smallest things often carry the greatest meanings. That a cent, a symbol so modest, so easily overlooked, can reveal the spirit of an entire people. That the 1999 penny, with its simple design and humble metal, became a mirror for the human soul. The camera slowly returns to the memorial engraved on its reverse. The lines are sharp, the pillars straight, the roof a perfect triangle, an emblem of endurance. Light glides across it, and for an instant, the stone seems to breathe. The narrator says that architecture is frozen belief, and so is coinage. Both are attempts to make ideals tangible. The penny is not just a fragment of economy, it is a monument to the idea that freedom, unity, and memory can be held in the hand. Then, applause. A long, profound silence. Only the faint sound of wind moving through unseen leaves. The scene changes. We are in the dark again, the world hushed. A faint glimmer appears, the same 1999 penny, resting alone in the dust of a forgotten floor. A beam of moonlight touches it, turning its copper to soft gold. The narrator's voice returns, almost a whisper: everything fades. But some things, somehow, remain. The music swells, gentle and eternal, as the film moves through moments of quiet beauty, coins drifting through water, light bending on copper, the face of Lincoln half in shadow. The narrator's final words rise softly over the score, carrying the feeling of centuries within them. We have measured our lives in time, in stories, in value. And when the last number is forgotten, when the machines are silent, something small will still gleam in the dark, a single cent, bearing the memory of who we were. The 1999 penny, a symbol not of what we owned, but of what we believed. The screen fades slowly to black. The last sound is that same coin falling once more, a single, bright ring of metal on wood, echoing, fading into silence, and then, nothing. Only the faint shimmer of copper in the dark, eternal and unbroken.